Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm 32 years old. And until recently, I thought I was having the best time of my life. I had just graduated with honors from a hard-earned master's degree and had finally closed on my first apartment. A modest space that represented all the independence and sacrifice of years of constant work and refusing to give up in the face of any difficulty. This achievement, which for many is just another step, for me was the definitive proof that, despite everything, I could make it on my own. But what I never imagined was that this same achievement, this source of pride I wanted to share with my family, would become the beginning of a battle I never saw coming. A moment that forever changed my relationship with those I thought would always support me. The family reunion that night was planned as a simple celebration, an excuse to get together after months of not seeing each other. And I arrived with emotions running high, ready to show them what I had achieved with so much effort, so they could finally see that my journey was also worth it, that I, too, deserved that pride and recognition. However, as soon as I walked through the door, I felt a tense atmosphere, as if something was about to break, and I wasn't wrong. Conversations mingled with forced laughter and glances that avoided my direction. And although I tried to remain calm, a part of me wondered if they would really welcome me with the same love I felt. And then in the middle of the room, while everyone was waiting for someone to speak, it was my mom who said it in a cold voice, almost without looking me in the eyes. "Amanda, you do many things, yes, but your brother. He is the true pride of this family." Those words fell like a bucket of ice water. Silence fell over the room, and I felt all the effort and tears vanish in an instant, as if they had never meant anything. At that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same, and that the struggle to be recognized would come at a much higher cost than I expected. If you've ever felt that, no matter how hard you try, someone you love makes you feel invisible or less important, then this story is for you. I want you to join me, to stay until the end, because I won't just tell you what happened that night, but everything that came afterward, the decisions I had to make to protect myself, and how I learned that sometimes dignity is worth more than any award or recognition. Before continuing, I invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any true stories like this one. Because together we can find strength in our experiences, and remember that no one has the right to make you feel less than. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever experienced something similar, because I know I'm not alone in this and I want to hear your story too. Now, join me as I discover how an achievement became the trigger for the deepest wound I've ever had to heal. For as long as I can remember, my life was marked by a constant feeling of not being enough, of being invisible in the midst of a family where love and attention seemed to be distributed according to very clear rules, but which never included my efforts or achievements. I grew up in a home where words of encouragement were scarce, and I often felt like a stranger in my own house, as if no matter how hard I tried, I would never earn the applause or the proud look they unhesitatingly bestowed upon my older brother. I vividly remember the days when my parents enthusiastically attended his soccer games, cheering him on with a passion that seemed exaggerated to me. "He's our champion," they would say, and although I also worked hard in school, practiced piano, and participated in activities, my achievements seemed to go unnoticed or seem less important. When my brother got good grades, the house was filled with congratulations and plans to reward him. But when he made mistakes, no matter how small, the family was indulgent, as if he was allowed anything, because deep down it was clear he was the favorite. I, on the other hand, learned from a very young age to be responsible, to take on the chores no one else wanted, and to work twice as hard so that maybe, just maybe, someone would look at me and say, "I'm proud of you." But those words seemed like a prize that always slipped through my fingers, as if my place in the family was destined to be that of the serious, the responsible, the one who never received applause, only expectations. My adolescence was a time when those wounds began to open sharply. The small disappointments turned into a deep feeling of emotional loneliness, because I felt I was fighting alone for a love that should have been unconditional, but that never came in the way I needed. During those long nights, when everyone was asleep, I wondered what was wrong with me, why I couldn't be enough for them, why my success always seemed overshadowed by the light shining on my brother. Sometimes I tried to talk, to share my feelings, but I was met with responses that hurt even more. "You have to understand that he needs more support. He's different with you." or simply an awkward silence that made me feel even smaller and without a place. It was in those moments that, unknowingly, I began to build walls to protect myself, to stop feeling that emptiness that made me question my own worth. This stage of my life was the invisible foundation for many of the decisions I would make later. A foundation full of scars that marked me forever, and taught me that familial love isn't always equitable or fair. And although today I try to heal those wounds, I know that those early disappointments, sown in my adolescence, were what made me strong, but also what left the seeds of a pain that no one should have to bear alone. Getting to where I am today wasn't a matter of luck or easy support, but rather a constant struggle against a headwind that seemed to blow from within my own home. From a very young age, I understood that if I wanted to move forward, if I wanted to fulfill my dreams, I couldn't wait for anyone to be there to push me forward or open doors for me. So, step by step, I took charge of my own destiny with the strength of someone who knows they can't afford to give up. I remember the long hours when, while other young people my age enjoyed the comfort and support of their family, I juggled studies with 2 jobs to pay for my materials, my transportation, and the rent of the small apartment where I lived. I earned scholarships thanks to my hard work and academic performance that, although valuable, was never acknowledged by those close to me. On the contrary, it seemed like my achievements vanished into thin air, as if they didn't really matter. Every time I received a good grade or recognition, I felt a small sense of personal pride, but that feeling soon became mixed with a bitter sense of emptiness, because at home no one seemed to notice, congratulate, or show interest. This is how I learned to be my own motivator, my own source of inspiration, but also my biggest critic when I felt I wasn't making enough progress. Sometimes, I would stay up late studying for important exams, knowing that the next day I would have to face a grueling day at work. I became adept at skipping outings with friends, skipping time off, and saying, "I can't," when invited to family events, because I knew that time should be spent building my future. Meanwhile, my family's celebrations and festivities revolved around my brother's triumphs, who seemed to have an easier path. I painfully remember how his failures or mistakes, instead of being reasons for criticism, became excuses to support him more, to give him new opportunities, to justify any stumbles. His failures were applauded as part of a process, while my small triumphs were ignored or overlooked, as if they had no value. It wasn't easy to live with that constant contradiction, feeling like my efforts were invisible, while the attention was focused on someone who didn't seem to need them as urgently. It made me question many things about familial love, about fairness in relationships, and about the price one pays when they don't receive the support they deserve. But it also made me strong. It taught me to trust myself, to value myself even if no one else did, and to fight tirelessly for what I longed for. Today, looking back, I know that every sacrifice, every surrender, every sleepless night was worth it, because they brought me here, to a place where I can proudly say I achieved it on my own. But I can't deny that, deep down, it still hurts that no one in my family celebrated with me, that no one came to say you did well, and that this emotional void has marked so many stages of my life. That mix of personal pride and family emptiness is a weight I carry with me, and that drives me to tell my story, so that others who feel invisible know they are not alone. There was a day, a precise moment in my life, when I knew I could no longer wait for anyone else's approval to move forward. It was a turning point that didn't come overnight, but after years of feeling invisible, struggling with indifference and lack of recognition in my own family. That day, I decided I was no longer going to let a lack of external support define who I am, or how far I can go. I vividly remember what that feeling of liberation felt like, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I realized that the only validation I truly needed was the one I could give myself, because at the end of the day, what matters is the value you recognize in yourself, not the value others give you. It was an act of self-love and courage that completely changed the course of my life. That day, I made decisions that marked a before and after. I bought my first business, a small but significant step toward the financial and personal independence I had long dreamed of. It wasn't easy. The bureaucracy, the fear of failure, the inner doubts, all of that was there, but I decided to face every obstacle with the conviction that I deserved to succeed, that I deserved to build something of my own, and something worthy of my own. Furthermore, That same year I managed to graduate from the degree I had worked so hard to complete. It was an achievement that, while to many it might seem ordinary, for me represented the culmination of years of sacrifice, renunciation, and silent effort. Finally, I was able to hold in my hands that diploma that certified not only an academic degree, but tangible proof that I had fought through adversity and doubt to get here. Not only that, I also opened my own company, a project I had long dreamed of, and that was now beginning to take shape thanks to my tireless work and unwavering determination. Signing contracts, establishing relationships with clients, watching my business grow. All of that was like witnessing the birth of a new version of me, a woman who finally believed in her own worth and her ability to achieve whatever she set her mind to. Of course, at first there was fear and a lot of uncertainty. What if I was wrong? What if everything fell apart? But hope and self-confidence were stronger than those fears. And it was in that hope that I found the strength to move forward, to defy all the negative voices that had once made me doubt. I felt a profound mix of independence and hope. Independence because I no longer depended on anyone to define my path, and hope because for the first time, I genuinely thought that maybe, just maybe, I could finally be seen, acknowledged, and valued by those who had previously ignored me. Not just as the sister who worked hard in silence, but as the successful and capable woman I always knew I could be. That day marked the beginning of a new phase. A phase where self-esteem ceased to be a daily battle and became a solid reality. It was the seed of a future in which I decided to put myself first, without fear of what family or the world might think. Because I understood that I deserved to be happy, I deserved to be successful, and I deserved to be recognized, even if it's only by myself first. The family gathering began like any other, with laughter, back-and-forth conversation, the unmistakable smell of home-cooked food, and the constant murmur of voices mingling in a single atmosphere. The room was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and of course my parents and brother. Everyone gathered in a space that, although small, seemed to hold centuries of stories, secrets, and unspoken expectations. I carried something very special with me, something that symbolized all the effort and sacrifice of the past few years. A commemorative plaque I had received at university for being the best graduate of my generation. My eyes were full of hope. That spark that ignites when you're about to share great news. An achievement you'd earned with sweat and tears. The moment seemed ideal for my family, the one that had so often doubted me, to finally acknowledge everything I had done. But right at that moment, like an unexpected and devastating blow, my mother interrupted the atmosphere with a phrase that still resonates in my mind, with a cold, cutting force that paralyzed me. You do many things, yes, but your brother, he is the true pride of this family. Those words were like a knife piercing my chest. I felt the air escape from my lungs, as if time had stopped for an instant, and everything around me had become slow, blurred. My body froze in place, my hands trembled as the plaque slipped slightly, and the gazes of everyone present seemed to deliberately avoid me, as if I didn't exist. It was a moment of absolute solitude in the midst of a sea of people pretending not to see my pain. I could hear my rapid breathing, the kind that betrays fear and sadness, and the sensation of my heart beating so loudly I could hear it thundering in my ears. I tried to maintain my composure, but inside I felt broken, as if everything I had worked so hard to build was invisible, useless, as if it had never really existed. While everyone continued talking, celebrating what they believed to be true pride, I felt an invisible line forming that separated me from the rest, a barrier made of favoritism and impossible to break expectations. The smile I had practiced for months faded, and with it, a part of me that still sought acceptance and recognition from my own family. That day, at that meeting, I understood that my place in that family was not meant to be that of the successful daughter, the woman who fought for her independence and her future. My place was always secondary, a mere spectator of someone else's brilliance that no one bothered to share with me. It was a deep wound, a disappointment that marked me forever, and the beginning of a path that would teach me to value my own worth without needing anyone else to validate it. After that sentence that cut through my soul, the silence in the room grew even heavier, as if every word spoken had left a dark shadow over all of us. I felt there was no point in trying to explain or justify anything, that my achievements and my efforts were invisible to those who should have been my greatest supporters. So, without making a fuss, without raising my voice or demanding what I deserved, I slowly stood up and took in my hands the object I had carried with such pride, that tangible symbol of years of sacrifice and sleepless nights. It was my award, the plaque certifying that I had been the best of my generation, the official recognition of a path fraught with obstacles that only I had been able to overcome. With a mixture of sadness and determination, I carefully placed it on the dining room table, right in the center, hoping, although I knew it was useless, that someone, at least one, would turn to look at it, to recognize it. But everyone's gaze remained fixed elsewhere, as if the object didn't exist, as if I didn't really exist either. It was a moment of profound loneliness, of feeling like all the words, all the unfulfilled promises, were condensed into the absolute silence that surrounded me. The murmurs and laughter continued on the other side of the room, deliberately ignoring what that small but powerful trophy represented to me. I felt invisible, stripped of all value in the eyes of those I most expected to support me. Then, just before turning and walking out the door, leaving them in the cold, heavy air, I uttered one last sentence that hung in the room, like a warning and a goodbye at the same time. Here it is. Maybe when you understand what it means, I won't be here to hear it anymore. My words were an echo of all the accumulated pain, a clear message that the time had come to move on, to leave behind that cycle of indifference and disdain that had marked me since I was a child. Because even though it hurt, I knew my worth didn't depend on their approval, that I had to move forward on my own, not for the applause that never came. I left that house with my head held high, even though my heart was shattered, knowing that that object, that plaque, was much more than a piece of metal and wood. It was my story, my struggle, and my dignity. And while they continued to ignore it, I began to forge my own path, far from those who didn't recognize me. As I left the house, closing the door behind me with a mixture of sadness and resolve, I felt the silence that remained inside that room weighed more than any shout or confrontation. No one stood up to stop me, not even a timid voice tried to change my mind. Only those muffled murmurs remained, almost as if the air itself had frozen, unable to process what had just happened. It was a silence that spoke for itself, a silence so heavy it seemed to scream everything no one dared to say out loud. In that instant, as I walked away from the house that had once been a refuge and now felt like an emotional prison, a bittersweet mixture settled in my chest. Deep pain for what I hadn't been able to change, for the years lost trying to be acknowledged, trying to be enough for a family that never truly wanted to see me. But also an unexpected peace, a calm I'd never felt before. That peace that is born when you finally decide to let go of the need to be validated by those who don't value you, and begin to give yourself the place you deserve. I remembered so many nights when I cried silently, wondering why my achievements always went unnoticed while my brother's mistakes and small triumphs were celebrated so effusively. I thought about how my efforts, my sacrifices, and my dreams seemed invisible to them, as if my worth depended exclusively on comparing myself to them, and always losing out. That family that chose to ignore my light, preferring to keep alive the illusion that only one could shine. But today, in that moment of departure, I understood that they never gave me my place because they never had it prepared for me. Not because I lacked worthiness, but because their love was always selective, conditional, and full of favoritism. And then I understood something fundamental. If they couldn't offer me that place, I had to be the one to give it to themselves, without permission, without excuses, without looking back. That night, when I got home, I sat in silence, surrounded by my own thoughts and that new sense of inner strength. It was a different kind of silence, one that no longer weighed me down, but liberated. A silence that screamed louder than any argument, because it contained the bravest decision I had ever made. To value myself without waiting for anyone's approval. And so, between tears and sighs, I knew that this was the true victory. Not the plaque left on the table, nor someone else's word. My victory was the respect and love I was finally giving myself. The recognition I had sought for so long and that, in the end, only I could offer. Weeks passed, and with them, the expected sound of a message or a call that might repair, at least a little, the damage done never came. The phone remained silent, as if the void they'd left me in stretched into infinity. There were no apologies, not even an attempt at a sincere explanation. What I received at best were empty and superficial phrases that only increased the wound, like that "you're exaggerating," which, although short and cold, made it clear that for them my pain had no real importance. It was as if my act of courage and determination was nothing more than a passing annoyance, something they could dismiss with indifference and minimize with empty words. That silence, that dismissal, hurt more than any direct confrontation. Because silence sometimes is the cruelest form of rejection. It is the unequivocal sign that they don't want to repair even the damage they've caused. It was a void that seemed to say, "You don't exist to the extent that it's not in my interest to acknowledge you." But to my surprise, not everyone in the family chose silence or indifference. Some voices, perhaps the least expected, began to reach out to me. Distant families, cousins I barely saw, family friends, and some younger members who grew up watching me struggle unrecognized, called to offer words of support and understanding. Their calls and messages became a kind of balm, proof that my story and my feelings did have value to someone else. These family members, who perhaps weren't part of my immediate family or who had observed the situation from the outside, saw clearly what I had experienced. Painful invisibility, unfair favoritism, and treatment that no one deserved, much less a sister who struggled to get ahead on her own. Their words not only comforted me, but also confirmed that I wasn't crazy, exaggerating, or overly sensitive. That my story made sense and that it deserved to be heard. That mix of silence from those close to me and unexpected support from others made me realize something fundamental. Not all blood ties are the same, and sometimes, the people you least expect are the ones who end up being your true family. People who don't abandon you in difficult times, who don't judge or belittle you, but rather acknowledge you and lift you up when you feel like falling. Despite the absence of meaningful words from those I thought should have given them, that external support gave me the strength to keep going, to understand that I don't need the approval of those who never truly loved me. That my worth doesn't depend on the validation of others, but on the self-love I build day by day, in silence and with great dignity. So, even though the answer I truly longed for didn't come, I learned that sometimes the silence of some opens space for the voices of those who truly matter, and that biological family isn't always the one who supports you when you need it most. From that day on, something inside me changed forever. It was as if a heavy veil of years and disappointments had been lifted from my shoulders, and I could finally breathe more freely. I made the firm decision to no longer allow myself unnecessary pain, to no longer give myself to those who didn't value or respect all I had done and achieved. I decided to set clear boundaries, invisible but firm like steel walls, that marked the line between what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't. Emotional distance began to be my best ally, not because I wanted to close my heart, but because I understood that there were people whom, no matter how close we were, I couldn't and shouldn't allow to enter and harm them. That distance wasn't an act of resentment, but an act of self-love, a shield that would protect me from future wounds and give me the opportunity to heal. I moved forward in my life with renewed determination, now without the constant and exhausting need to seek external validation. I no longer expected applause or recognition from those who had chosen not to see me, because I understood that my worth doesn't depend on their opinions. What I do, who I am, and what I'm worth are measured by my own standards and by the positive impact I can make in my world. It was a slow, sometimes painful, but deeply liberating process. I learned that family doesn't always mean respect or unconditional support, and that sometimes those blood ties can be the deepest source of disappointment. But I also understood that I could build my own support system, a solid network of people who truly value me. True friends, colleagues who respect me, and loved ones I choose and who choose me every day. In this new version of myself, I allowed myself to flourish without fear. I took risks, sought out new opportunities, and surrounded myself with positive energy that helped me grow. I let go of expectations and the weight of old family judgments to embrace authenticity and the freedom of being who I truly am. Every step I take, every achievement I celebrate, I now do so with a smile of genuine pride, because I know I don't need anyone else's approval to feel whole. My story, with its wounds and lessons learned, has taught me that strength doesn't always come from outside, but rather from our ability to rebuild, reinvent, and move forward with dignity. And although there were dark moments, there was also light. And I carry that light with me, illuminating the path to a future where respect, self-love, and authenticity are the pillars of my existence. This is the new version of myself. Strong, clear, and absolutely worthy of being loved and respected. Not for what I do for others, but for who I am for myself. Betrayals don't always come accompanied by shouting, insults, or explosive fights. They don't always come wrapped in a whirlwind of hurtful words or obvious confrontations. Sometimes the deepest betrayals, the ones that hurt the most, arrive disguised as fake smiles, averted glances, and carefully folded napkins at the table at a family gathering. They come in those small gestures, in those silences that weigh more than any scream, in those absences that hurt more than any hypocritical presence. They are betrayals that hide behind courtesy and good manners, but that deep down break, shatter, and leave their mark forever. And in the midst of these silent betrayals, how many times have we left our dignity in the hands of those who never really thought of us? How many times have we expected recognition, support, or simply a little affection from those who, in reality, only saw us as a supporting role, an ornament, or someone to be used and then discarded? How many times have we ignored those signs, kept quiet to keep the peace, sacrificed our well-being for a mirage of family or love that was never real? Today, I ask you who are watching this story, how many times have you left your dignity in the hands of those who never valued what you gave? How many times have you felt invisible, silenced, or belittled, despite all the efforts, sacrifices, and achievements you built with your own sweat and tears? This story is a mirror for all of us, a call to open our eyes and understand that respect is not a privilege to be negotiated, but a right we must demand, first from ourselves and then from those we choose to keep close to us. If someone has ever made you feel like you didn't matter, that your efforts weren't worth it, that your love was insufficient, this channel is for you. Here you will find true stories, stories of struggle, of courage, of people who decided to rise up, leave toxicity behind, and rebuild themselves with strength and dignity. I invite you to subscribe, to be part of this community that knows what it's like to face the pain of betrayal, and come out stronger than ever. Because you deserve to be seen, heard, and valued. Because your stories matter, and can inspire others going through the same thing. You are not alone here. We are family here, even if your biological family doesn't always understand us. Remember, your worth doesn't depend on the opinions or recognition of others, but on the strength and love you have for yourself. Never let anyone make you feel less than you. Because at the end of the day, the greatest revenge is to live well, be happy, and never forget who you are.